We will not stop. We will keep pushing forward. Keep advancing. No hesitation. No mercy for those who stand against us. As tensions across the Middle East surged and nearly 3,000 American troops were already positioned near Iran's border, military installations across the United States rapidly shifted into full operational tempo. Massive logistical operations began almost instantly as the Pentagon prepared to move heavy combat power across the ocean. Infantry units and Marine forces were already deployed in the region. But soldiers on the ground cannot sustain a prolonged campaign without the heavy backbone of modern warfare, armor, artillery systems, and thousands of combat vehicles. And moving that much equipment required something enormous: sea lift. Across military rail yards throughout the United States, loading operations began at a relentless pace. Armored vehicles rolled forward one by one, climbing metal ramps and settling onto long lines of flatbed rail cars. Main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored transport trucks. Each vehicle was carefully positioned and secured using massive steel chains and reinforced wool blocks designed to prevent even the slightest movement during transit. Meanwhile, at nearby airfields, another piece of the operation was unfolding. Rows of Boeing AH-64 Apache attack helicopters were being pulled from their hangars. Maintenance crews moved quickly as the helicopter's folded rotor blades, normally stored to save space, were unfolded, locked into place, and inspected. Once ready, the Apaches powered up. One after another, the engines roared to life. Rotor blades began spinning, gathering speed until the aircraft lifted off the runway and headed directly toward coastal ports where naval transport vessels were waiting. These helicopters would be shipped overseas alongside the ground vehicles. When the rail convoys finally arrived at the ports, the true scale of the mobilization became impossible to ignore. Across vast staging areas near the docks, thousands of military vehicles stretched in every direction. Light transport jeeps, personnel carriers, utility trucks, high-mobility rocket launcher vehicles, fuel tankers, light armored reconnaissance vehicles, heavy armored logistics trucks, engineering vehicles, mobile command posts, M113 armored personnel carriers lined the rows. Humvees fitted with turret-mounted weapons stood ready nearby. And towering over everything were the giants of the battlefield. M1 Abrams main battle tanks, each weighing more than 70 tons. Beside them stood M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, recovery vehicles, and dozens of other specialized combat machines. All of it arranged in carefully organized rows, engines silent, waiting for the next phase. Soon the vehicles were assembled into loading columns and began slowly moving toward the massive sealift ships docked along the pier. These vessels were specifically designed for military logistics. They're called roll-on, roll-off ships. Instead of cranes lifting cargo aboard, the vehicles simply drive directly into the ship under their own power, climbing the stern ramp and parking inside enormous cargo decks. But the process is slow and incredibly precise. Every single vehicle has a predetermined parking position inside the ship based on its weight, dimensions, and the order it will need to be unloaded once it reaches the destination. The heaviest vehicles, Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles, are positioned on the lowest decks, where the ship's reinforced structure can support their immense weight. Lighter vehicles are placed on higher levels. All of this is mapped out on a detailed load plan long before the first vehicle even approaches the ramp. Drivers move forward one at a time. Ship crew members stand on both sides of the ramp, guiding them using hand signals and radio communication. Inside the cargo decks, the margins are razor-thin. Vehicles are parked only inches apart to maximize storage capacity. Every turn must be perfect. Every reverse movement must be exact. One mistake, and a 70-ton tank could slam into the vehicle parked beside it. The loading schedule allowed 3 days to complete the entire operation. That meant the crews worked continuously. Day shift, night shift. The operation never stopped. During daylight hours, sunlight poured through the open ramps. But when night fell, the cargo decks glowed under the harsh light of industrial overhead lamps and the headlights of the vehicles slowly driving inside. Forklifts moved constantly through the narrow aisles. They carried pallets filled with spare parts, maintenance tools, and ammunition crates, placing them in designated storage spaces between the rows of vehicles. Smaller equipment, toolkits, radios, medical supplies, was packed into containers and stacked wherever open space could be found. Once each vehicle reached its assigned position, the final phase began. Securing the cargo. Ship crew members and Army transport specialists worked side by side, attaching massive steel chains from reinforced tie-down points welded into the ship's deck to strong anchor points on the vehicle frames. Each chain was tightened using heavy turnbuckles until the vehicle was locked firmly in place. Every vehicle required multiple chains. Front, rear, both sides. Nothing could be allowed to shift, not even a few centimeters, during the violent motion of an ocean crossing. After 3 full days of nonstop loading and securing, the ships were finally packed to capacity. The stern ramps slowly lifted and sealed shut. Mooring lines were released. Powerful tugboats pushed against the hulls, guiding the heavy transport ships away from the pier and into the shipping channel. The sealift convoy then moved into open water. Once clear of the harbor, the ships formed up and began their long journey toward the Middle East, where the equipment would eventually be unloaded. Escort warships moved into position around the convoy, forming a protective perimeter. But while the reinforcements were crossing the ocean, American forces already deployed near Iran's border were not waiting. They were already fighting. At a concealed firing position behind a low ridge, a HIMARS rocket artillery battery received its next fire mission. The M142 HIMARS launcher, mounted on a 6-wheeled truck, had been sitting quietly in position. The crew had been waiting. Then the coordinates arrived. Instantly, the crew sprang into action. The firing order came through the radio. The first rocket ignited. A massive blast of flame and smoke erupted as the rocket shot out of the launcher pod, shaking the truck with violent force. Seconds later, another rocket launched. Then another. The rockets streaked upward into the sky one after another, climbing high before arcing toward their target, an enemy vehicle staging area located dozens of kilometers away. Each rocket carried a warhead designed to destroy armored vehicles and equipment caught in the open. The moment the final rocket left the launcher, the crew immediately began relocating. The launcher pod lowered back into travel position. The driver slammed the truck into gear. Within seconds, the HIMARS vehicle sped away from the firing point, disappearing before enemy forces could return fire. At another forward position nearby, a U.S. reconnaissance team was preparing an unmanned aerial vehicle for surveillance operations. The drone arrived packed inside a hardened transport case. Operators opened the case and began assembling the aircraft on a flat patch of ground. The wings were attached to the fuselage. The tail section was locked into place. Control surfaces were checked carefully to ensure free movement. Next, the camera pod mounted beneath the aircraft was powered on and tested. A live video feed immediately appeared on a portable ground control station resting on the hood of a nearby vehicle. The operators confirmed the system was functioning perfectly. Batteries were installed. The small electric motor spun briefly during a final test. Then the drone was launched. The motor roared to life as the aircraft climbed quickly into the air, banking toward its assigned surveillance sector. On the ground control monitor, the camera feed displayed the terrain below in real time. The operators watched closely as the drone passed over ridge lines, open terrain, roads, and dry riverbeds, scanning every inch of the landscape. They were searching for anything unusual: enemy vehicles, troop movements, supply routes, or any sign of military activity hidden in the terrain.